Welcome to DevOps Chats, the industry-leading podcast for DevOps, digital transformation, cloud native, and cybersecurity. If it's happening on DevOps Chats.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel.
And I'm Mitchell Ashley.
And you're listening to DevOps Chats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey Mitchell, we got to work on that synchronization. I don't think we'd make the Olympics synchronized swimming team with that, but
there's a little bit too much pause, but we'll get it down. We got saying, still secure after all these years and other names, but we'll get it.
I'm never quite sure what name to say, to tell you the truth.
That's
just getting old. They didn't tell you about this stuff when I was younger. Anyway, so Mitchell, we're back in the swing of things here, hosting both DevOps Chats and Security Boulevard's chats, and they are available as audio and video podcast on your podcast platform of choice, as well as on TechStrong TV or .tv. I believe it's on there as well. And I'm having a lot of fun doing it, Mitch. It's easy to fall back, was it back in the saddle again?
It is, and well, first I loved doing this with you when we started. Back 15, 20 years ago. And I was listening to
every bit of 20 years ago, Mitch.
Yeah, I was trying to give us a little room there.
All right.
But I was listening to the first one that we just recorded a couple weeks ago, and just the audio. And I just had this sort of like reminiscence of like listening to us on podcasts before, just hearing our voices and instead of seeing each other and hearing voices. There's something about the richness of the voice of the person, just hearing you and not seeing you, but just hearing you. It was kind of, I don't know if I would say it's more intimate or more, connected
it's
to
warm.
it. Maybe I'm just being nostalgic, but I really
Let me ask you, you think our voices have changed? I mean, certainly our looks have changed from 20 years ago, but I feel like my voice is similar still.
I know. Yeah, I think it is. I think mine is.
But we've been talking all this time, so who the heck knows?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's great to be on, Mitch. Let's jump into, because we got a bunch of stuff to cover for DevOps Chat this week. And, as we've been doing, we've been kind of featuring what's news in DevOps, what do we think is cool, as well as some of the things we're seeing on DevOps.com. Right? Some of the hot topics, hot stories there. So a hot story that ran, by the time people listen to this, it'll be the end of this week or next week. But a hot story from this week on DevOps.com was the practicalities of open sourcing. And it was a contributed article. I'm just trying to remember. It's Ashwin Raghav Mohan Ganesh, right?
Yep.
And the gist of the article was kind of a how-to and gotchas and things to be aware of if you want to open source some software you wrote. And Mitch, every developer wants to develop. Some have visions of developing something that they sell, write once and sell millions of times and become wealthy beyond their dreams. Others think of writing something and then they're going to open source it in some way, change the world. The next Linux, the next Open Telemetry, the next what have you. But what was interesting in this article is these guys took a no holds barred approach. The grass isn't always greener.
No, and it was pretty down to earth, practical, right? I mean, it wasn't visions of sugar plums dancing in your head, of being the next Linus, kind of person. And they had a lot of good recommendations, and they talked about maybe it's the fear of making or faking it about, okay, do I really want to contribute to open source? People are going to find out how good a developer I am. Maybe I'm not as good as I think, and just issues like that, as well as, contributing to open source projects. And
the nuts and bolts of starting an open source project, maintaining an open source project, and I hope in reading that article, people would have a newfound appreciation for maintainers of open source projects, because
it's a labor of love. It is a labor of love.
In most cases, it's not a paying position. It's a thankless job in some ways, and it's a lot of work.
All those
A lot of
people
work.
you're responding to about bugs in your software at work, well, guess what? Everybody across the world might be emailing you or messaging you about
Or cursing
your
you.
open source, right?
Yeah. You know what else, though, it made me think when I was reading that article, Mitch, something that happened in both of our careers was, you have the best of intentions. You're going to open source this software and you hope you build a community around it. And wow, eureka, you do. It's a tremendous community. And then you find people who are basically building off of your contribution, of your contributed source code to build very successful business models and companies. And you say to yourself, that's not right. They're building off of mine. I want to pull my software out of open source, right? We saw Renaud Dreisen and Ron, right, at Tenable, Ron Gula do this, I guess had around 2005, 2006, something like that, with Nessus. And they just stopped developing an open version. They still had a free version you could use, but it wasn't open anymore. And of course, there was the fork of OpenVAS, right? If you remember, there was like a fork of Nessus. It got some momentum. We recently saw this with what's the big thing?
Red Hat and
Tofu. What's the open tofu?
Excuse me. Yeah.
What did Tofu fork? Do you remember? Wasn't it Hashi? One of the Hashi was Terraform?
Let me look it up.
Yeah, no, it was Hashi's either Terraform, maybe one of them.
I'm trying to remember.
I was getting confused.
I don't see it right off the bat. Yeah, Open Tofu. Let's see, what was it? Oh, HashiCorp.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, it is HashiCorp, and I think wasn't it Hashi's Terraform project?
Terraform.
That was
exactly what it is. Terraform.
Because
Sorry, I just hit a blank on that.
Yeah, no, Hashi changed the licensing, and I happen to believe that the last 10 years were a golden age for open source under this foundational kind of model where you had these foundations. But I think a lot of companies who contributed with the best of intentions, open source, started to realize it's a tough business model to be uber successful in. And in many ways, maybe they wish they had done it differently. And so they're changing their model. And then, of course, this is Nessus 2006 again. You get some people in the community who go the other way and say, well, this is my prerogative in open source. I'll just fork it.
It's interesting because what I saw happen just in 2023 is really two bifurcated strategies. One is let's bring open source back and make it kind of closed source, but we'll have an open source something like it, right? Like the Red Hats, et cetera, HashiCorp. At the other end of the spectrum, there were smaller, more startup companies who were adopting a model of everything we do is open source. Everything we build into the software goes into the open source version, and we'll make our money by running it in a hosted version of it. And, as opposed to the support model like we did with Red Hat in the early days. This was we'll operate it and run it for you and make it easy. And that was their business model. So now there hasn't been somebody as big as Red Hat or whatever, or HashiCorp, that's done that, I don't think. But it was interesting that we believe in open source. There's a community of people who, are very firm on their beliefs about it and will never use something commercial if there's an open source option available. But I think people have gotten more realistic about it. Our investors are expecting us to make more money. I'm tired of justifying why we're doing this open source version.
Right.
And I can't demonstrate how much money. Maybe they'll prove how much it was worth when they stop it, but who knows?
I mean, the underlying issue is you got to explain to your board why 97% of the people who use the software aren't paying for it.
Yeah. That's they call that theft in other organizations. Not saying it is here.
Yeah.
But that's how a business person is going to be like.
But that's that's built into the model where if you get 4% of people who pay for it, you're a success. You're a Hall of Famer in baseball if you get a base hit 3 out of 10 at bats.
Yeah, batting 200.
It's the same thing. Yeah, batting 300 is Hall of Fame material. Same thing in open source. Anyway, it's a great article. People should check it out. The next DevOps.com article has more of a security bent to it. Mitch, and I was almost hesitant to put it on here and put it on Security Boulevard chats as well. But it's around a survey, that was done. Let me just make sure I get this right. Cyber attacks aimed at software supply chains are pervasive. And there's an article by Mike Vizard. Look, I don't think the headline is radical. I think we all kind of knew this. Software supply chain security is probably one of the hottest areas in security, and it has a particular DevOps bent because it is about attacking pipeline, right? And inherent in that CI/CD process. It just amazes me, though, how quickly it shot up the charts here, the Billboard Top 100, right? Where the White House is weighing in, and the federal government is weighing in, and the EU is weighing in, and, DevOps companies that now call themselves DevSecOps companies, of course, are kind of really building around this, as are some of the traditional AppSec vendors, right? Vericode's all over this. Checkmarx is all over it. Software supply chain security, SBOMs, hot stuff.
It's a confluence of multiple things happening over a period of time, going back to SolarWinds, of course, but also Log4j demonstrated how pervasive. You don't have to attack your software. If I can attack something else that a wide, large number of people use, that's a great way to, compromise and get into where you shouldn't be. And it's interesting because this is sort of the layered onion problem. There's, like all security, there's sort of, I would say, the easier things to do at the edges, like let's make sure you're getting your images from a known source. You're controlling how software like images, whether it's container image or open source software, how that gets into your dev process. And there's basic things like secrets management, and making sure that's not in your code. And there's a lot of things like that you could do. But as you dig down into it, and I did a project with Red Hat last year around securing the CI/CD pipeline and getting into really taking each step of that, containerizing it, and then securing the access to that. So if someone got in the middle of your dev, all the tool chains that you're using as part of your CI/CD workflow, they couldn't break in at one point and then get compromised the whole thing. It's how do you kind of secure each chain of the link? So you can take it pretty far. And it's not super complicated, but it's more than just using good, secure images.
I don't disagree at all. It's, I think, look, there's going to be a lot of issues that pop up around this, right? The dependency issues that you're talking about is one, and dependencies go forward and backwards too, right? So not just where I've used this software that I now have to go update, but software that was, or components that were in my software that depended on other things that got updated. I now have to make sure it updates through too. And then that doesn't even count the APIs involved and everything else.
Yeah.
So it's a big thing, and it may not be new to most of our audience, but it's certainly, look, software supply chain security.
I think every development team, and I can't say every, but most development teams have now taken this as, we have to really work on this and focus on it. We can't just let it go. Right?
Absolutely,
we don't want to be the next one with the problem. So they're taking it serious, which is great. Good for them.
Well, they're going to be forced to. Next up, Mitch, I wanted to mention an interview that Mike Vizard did with Solomon Hyke, right? I think most of our audience is probably familiar with the name Solomon Hyke. Solomon, of course, was the founder, CTO of Docker Inc., and guy behind kind of the Docker container, which really, that was the birth of cloud native in many ways, right? Just a whole different way of looking at stuff. It enabled microservice-based architectures.
Enable the cloud, really,
Kubernetes.
from virtual machines to containers to
the move from
and,
infrastructure as a service to platform as a service, right?
Exactly.
So, of course, Solomon left Docker, I don't know, Mitch, years ago, or probably 3 to 5 years ago.
I remember.
And I hadn't really heard much from him recently, but I guess they must have put a little PR campaign in, because I saw it pop up on a few sites in addition to Mike's video interview, which is available on TechStrong TV. Solomon's new company is called Dagger. And, segueing off the last kind of segment we talked about software supply chain, he said, in doing their research on this, the biggest issue they were hearing from developers was the supply chain issue, right? The pipeline issue. How do I do my pipelines securely? How do I do them efficiently? As fast as possible. And so that's what Dagger's about. And, look, I'm of two minds. It's hard to catch lightning in a bottle twice. Right?
Recreating a success is no small challenge.
Yes. And Solomon certainly captured some lightning in the bottle with Docker. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen with Dagger, but he certainly seems to understand the mind of the developer or the challenges that developers face. And, I don't disagree with what he's saying, that this is a problem.
Well, it definitely is. And all the experience that comes with having done Docker and gone through the successes and the challenges that entails, hugely valuable. You and I also know it's all about timing. I mean, that's the part you don't necessarily control. It's Docker was the right thing at the right time. We didn't know we needed, but it caught fire. And, whether Dagger does that or not, we wish him the best and hope it does and does successfully. But that's the one thing I remember when I interviewed for one of the startup jobs I had, and I asked a very successful startup CEO, and he said it was timing. It really was. I mean, that went from a nice exit to an amazing exit. So, that being aside, I think the other thing about Dagger that was really interesting is kind of solving the problem or working on the problem of the complexities of a CI/CD pipeline that you're trying to deliver software or build software in multiple environments. Here's my Python environment. Here's my Node environment. Here's my software that I'm putting into a secure DoD or Fed or FIPS kind of certification. I'm testing across these different variations of configurations from old code to new code. I'm running a bespoke version of my application one time, every time for a customer. Building a pipeline to do all that. And then say, now let's add this thing we're going to do some AI. Let's add that to all 15 or 20 or 50 configurations. That's a lot of work. And I think that's part of what he's doing with Dagger is how to automate that so that you're not writing just scripts and you got to go change all that stuff by hand.
I agree. Look, like I said, I understand. I don't disagree with the problem he's uncovered here, and I hope he comes up with a great solution for it, and wish him the best. We'll keep a close eye on it. I think that's all I've got in
did you want to talk about code reviews? Was that one you wanted to hit on?
Oh, yeah, there was a great little, I think it's a great article for the DevOps aficionados out there, right? The real hardcore DevOps people. And this was a little article. Mitch, why don't you want to go over it? Go ahead.
Yeah. We're talking about the benefits, the purposes of code reviews. And if our developers, of course, will know exactly what that is. That's one of the things that I enjoyed most and learned the most in leading a development team was doing code reviews. And not that I'm a better coder than anyone else on the team. I'm definitely not. They're more efficient and experienced than I am. But when you walk through the logic of something, and here's how I built it, and here's how this works, and how this function that calls that, and you see how things are put together in the software, in the architecture, and the kind of design of it. And there's review for security, and there's review for, are you doing things well in the right way and best coding practices? those are all good. The thing I found the most valuable was, oh, you know what? We have a library that does that. So use that instead of writing your code. Or, there's a microservice that we just enhanced that, while we're all running in 50 different directions, you wouldn't have known. So there's economies that you get out of it, of learning from each other, or maybe experience levels. I've got a great, algorithm for that. I can show you. There's a really cool pattern of how to do that. That knowledge learning and knowledge sharing, I think, is one of the biggest benefits. I don't know if he exactly mentioned that in the article. His other point was keep it small, keep it simple, stupid, kind of the KISS principle, which trying to do a code review on a big application or a lot of, you get tired. About an hour, 2 hours into this, you're ready to pack it up and okay, the rest looks good. Let's move on, folks.
Yeah.
So
and then you find out what you left.
Take your time. You don't have to boil
it was, how do you eat the elephant one spoonful at a time?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, so that's agile. That's part of the agile process, right? Take this in bite-sized chunks that you can digest easily, you can work on easily without burning out. And then secondly, that idea of code review with a team and building rapport and camaraderie and a common sense is key to the culture you want to foster, whether it's DevOps or Agile or ITSM even, right? Building team in your IT, building the team in your IT team is an important aspect that I think sometimes gets short shrift because we tend to focus on tools.
Absolutely. And this article didn't do that. It had a lot of recommendations, best practices, some really good thoughts. I would definitely recommend, if you're doing development, do code reviews. Check it out. It's a good article.
Absolutely.
It was titled Improving Efficiency with Smaller Code Reviews. Is the name of it.
And it's on DevOps.com. Mitch, I wanted to bring up another subject.
Okay.
We might as well announce it here because word's getting out and I don't want anyone to steal our headlines, right? So, I think we've all been hearing over the last year, DevOps is getting old, DevOps isn't cool, DevOps they're not working as well as
Still
we thought.
Relevant.
There's platform engineerings and SLOs and SREs and everything else irrelevant. And, I feel like I'm watching the cable news channels 24/7, but when you go do your fact finding, the search terms around DevOps are more popular than ever.
Absolutely.
Even at DevOps.com, which, truth be told, used to be significantly behind Security Boulevard in views, pages, and everything, has actually been growing much faster.
Yep.
And is in fact just about caught up.
The data
to the
does
Boulevard
not lie.
site.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that shows to me DevOps is alive and kicking. And, I think I've mentioned it to you, Mitch. I might have mentioned it on our show or on TechStrong TV. I had a conversation around this with a lot of DevOps leaders, one of whom, Jody Banzai. Jody is, of course, was the founder of AppDynamics, CEO there. He is the CEO and founder of Harness, and the CEO and founder of Traceable.ai and Harness.io. And Jody said, DevOps isn't going anywhere. It's bigger than ever. But what we're seeing is the evolution of the next phase of DevOps, where instead of having cobbled together tools, we have coherent end-to-end platforms where the cultural arguments and benefits that DevOps brings is sort of already baked in when they're accepted. It's not like an ooh-ha eureka moment that you can have a cross-functional team that actually works together. That Agile is not going anywhere in spite of what some people say.
Right.
And so in response to all this, Mitchell, right, we're DevOps.com, damn it. And,
that's Gumby, damn it.
Yeah. Well, I need my cigar. But that's part of our mission, right? That's part of our mission to kind of spread the good news of DevOps. And that's what we want to do. And as part of that, I know you are the leader at TechStrong Research. You're leading a new research project. Is it DevOps Next?
DevOps Next, exactly.
And we're going to look at, what's new and coming in DevOps. What are people hearing? And so I'd like to use the podcast as a way. Number one, there's going to be a lot of surveys or some surveys coming out of this that we'd love for you to participate in. But number two, if you have the time and so inclined, if you wouldn't mind being interviewed by Mitchell and his team as to what your views and uses of DevOps are, we'd love to have that kind of data that we can pull into the report.
We would. Absolutely. So, it's one thing to take a survey, and we do a lot of that and collect data, and that's good for the analysis, comparative kind of things. It's another to sort of get the, feet on the street. What are people really doing? What have they learned? What are the challenges? Because you can also validate some of the data, but more importantly, you could put some real specifics around it. And I think that will be one of the most compelling things about our report. It isn't just going to be cold, hard facts, right? Those will be there and analysis of that. But let's really dig into where people are. When we say scaling DevOps is a challenge, okay, let's get into the details of why that is. And maybe some of that will appear in the report or on our podcast, and we'll share those things. So we'd love to hear from folks. If you want to reach out to me, it's just Mitchell@techstrongresearch.com. And I anticipate this is second quarter when this will come out. Was we put some more kind of meat on the bones, we'll know for sure. But we want to hear from everybody that would like to share with us. And
there's going to be a lot of ancillary activities around DevOps Next, including this whole campaign called Got DevOps. We're going to be asking people to do like 10, 12-second videos, about do they have DevOps? Do they love DevOps? Do they like DevOps, whatever, or with the hashtag Got DevOps, and maybe we'll have some cool prizes out there for people who participate.
No milk mustache, though. You don't have to have that.
No, you don't have the milk mustache. No, I mean, if you did, you might have a better shot at winning the prize.
That's
but
true. You would stand out from the crowd.
Yes. We're going to be doing a limited video series on Got DevOps and DevOps Next, as well as some webinars. And there'll be a lot of editorial stuff. And as I mentioned, the social media, maybe even a panel or so at the RSA conference on the security aspects of DevOps Next. So we're excited by this. As Mitchell said, if you'd like to participate, Mitchell@techstrongresearch.com. And get ready for our Got DevOps video campaign on all the usual social media, TikToks, and all of that stuff. So it should be fun.
Yeah, we have Mitch, a roundtable coming up. We have a roundtable coming up. I think it's the 23rd of this month. Talking why I love DevOps.
Right, and that'll be sort of a prelude to it. Yep, so and that's on DevOps Unbound, isn't it?
Yes, it's DevOps Unbound. Right on. It's on. The 22nd at 11 o'clock, Why I Love DevOps. And some great folks are on that panel, too.
Very cool. All right, Mitch, I don't have anything else on DevOps.
Well, we do. We just don't have
for
time.
Today. Yeah, I think we're about out of time. We probably went overtime. Anyway, man, as usual, it's great doing another DevOps chat with you.
I love it. We're doing it in different cities, just like we used to.
Yeah, you bet. We'll be back on next week with another episode of DevOps Chat. But until then, be well. For TechStrong and DevOps.com, this is Alan Schimmel.
And Mitchell Ashley.
You just listened to another episode of
DevOps Chats.